Can you say your name and job title, please?
My name is Dan Gallan. I'm a freelance sports journalist.
You're here today. Actually, we've already recorded one episode, but that probably went up 2 months ago. But you're here today because Jason Holder believes that Bazball won't work for non-Big Three teams. And I kind of get his general point. But if you could explain what he's saying, and then I think I will discuss why I think he's wrong.
Okay. That's an interesting way to start a conversation. Because actually, I agree with a lot of what Jason believes. So I spoke to Jason Holder before the first of two tests between South Africa and the West Indies. And we started the conversation about how you prepare for a two-match series and how, as a West Indian cricketer, a West Indian test cricketer, you gear up and you hone your skills in a first-class system that only offers 5 or 6 games, and you only play 6 tests a year. How can you be any good at this, especially as a batter? A bowler, that's one thing, you can hit your length, but how do you build that consistency into your run getting, which the greats of yesteryear were afforded, right? Okay, so we started with that. And then I said, well, the English seem to do it. So are you saying it's because of the amount of cricket they play? He said yes. And he says, if you look at Bazball, only England, Australia, and India can play Bazball because if you're a batter and you go out and you've got 6 tests, never mind, forget the job security and the financial reward. West Indian cricketers earn, I think, 1/3 per test of what an English cricketer earns. If you're not playing if you're a West Indian cricketer and you're not playing on the T20 franchise circuit, you're not earning a lot of money. So you really need to, and there's only 6 tests a year, you really got to play every single one of those tests. So that's 12 innings that you got. If you're facing a Kagiso Rabada and Marco Jansen, for example, in South Africa, and the ball's bouncing and hooping around, not so much hooping, but seaming around, you can't afford to be a bit reckless. You can't say, I might fail. I might do a Zach Crawley, for example, and fail for 6 games, because that's all you got. You've only got those 6 games. So it almost forces you to play a little within yourself. This is what Jason Holder says, and I believe that there's some merit to his argument, that you're going to look to play with a high elbow. You're going to look to be technically correct. You can't Bazball it about the show, because your not your margin for error, but your second chances are so limited. And because you are conscious of this, if you're just going to sit there and try and play with a high elbow to Kagiso Rabada, he's eventually going to get you out, especially because you haven't had that time to hone your technique over the course of an 18-county season and the course of a 13 test year season, for example. So he says that these batting collapses, this gap between the haves and the have-nots in cricket, are going to increase. If India and Australia want a Bazball, they got the opportunity to do so, but no one else can do it.
Okay. There's some very sensible stuff that he said in there, and it makes a lot of sense. The problem with his overall concept, though, is that the England batters were not exactly batting particularly well before Bazball, even though they had all of those advantages available to them. And so what they did is they decided that they were going to start batting in a white ball setup, which all the players that he's talking about from the other countries actually already do, right? And in some cases, you would say that England, maybe not so much India, but England and Australian cricketers probably play, this is going to sound weird, but too much red ball cricket in order to fully convert to a new style. Whereas if you are outside of your Chandrapal, Brathwaite type players, but if you're Jermaine Blackwood, Jermaine Blackwood was Bazballing when there was no Bazballing, right? Like essentially he hit seamers over the top early on. And so from that perspective, I think what he's missing that side of it. I agree with the whole idea of if you fail, you will go. But if the whole team, and it has to be a whole team thing, because England didn't do this on a one-player basis, right? If the whole team decides that they are going to go in with a Bazball style, and that means that you do get a full year of Test cricket, and we're saying these are our best 6 batters. We know you're going to fail a couple of times, but go out there and have some fun with it. I think that actually on that side of things, you could, especially think about this. It's the end of the World Test Championship and West Indies can't make it, right? And they've got a bunch of Test matches to play. They can experiment in a way that England, Australia, India cannot, because it would be the end of the world if one of those teams got bowled out for 35 trying Bazball, right? So there is actually a freedom within it on the other side. So I get what he is saying. And his general point about the haves and the have-nots is 100% true. And also the amount of red ball cricket that is played. But the actual Bazballing, I think if I'm coaching Sri Lanka or if I'm coaching West Indies, I'm trying to think somewhere else, maybe New Zealand as they start to collapse, I'd be going, there's some stuff here that we could use, right? Maybe not all of it, but there's certainly some stuff here that we could use and that we can do in a lower pressure situation. England did it only because it's easy to reshape your team when literally there is no team left to reshape.
It's interesting what you said, though. If you said if you were coaching West Indies, and I think that is for me the major hole in Jason's argument, because he's talking it from a player's point of view. He's saying that the players themselves feel stifled because if they fail, say Jason Holder goes out and try, or any of the other players in this in the 2 test match series against South Africa go out and they fail 4 times, giving it a tonk, as it were, or trying to reverse sweep or do a bit of a Bazball, they feel that their coach might drop them.
Yeah.
So that's why when you're saying that if I was the coach of West Indies, this has to come from the top down. You know, Rob Key,
exactly.
Brendan McCullum, and the captain Ben Stokes told the players and told anyone who would listen, the media, every press conference, that we are allowing our players to go out and fail because we want to recalibrate the way that we go out and bat, because we think that yes, we might collapse and we've got conservatism to fall back on, but our default will be to attack. If they select a team of if Nicholas Pora makes the side and I don't know who else, Odia Smith or Shimron Hetmeyer are selected in the test team, and they say, okay, this is how we're going to go about it, fine. But look at the team that they select for South Africa. Look at the team that South Africa select for the West Indies. Why is Brevis not getting a first-class game? If the entire ecosystem within these smaller countries wanted to play Bazball, I believe that they could. But because the boards themselves are so stifled by the fear of failure, the players themselves don't feel like they can Bazball, and so the gap just widens.
Yeah, that's a bit I don't agree with. I agree with the bit that if Brevis isn't playing first-class cricket, then you're not even putting yourself in a position to Bazball, right? But what I don't agree with is that the thought that they're doing it because they're conservative. They're doing it because they haven't actually decided to try something new. Right. It's not that they're conservative. No, until this, we hadn't had as big a shift in cricket really since West Indies. Right. Even Australia did it from a position of strength, and they went, we're going to up our scoring rate a little bit. Okay. England didn't up their scoring rate a little bit. They doubled their scoring rate in some cases. Right. That's a big shift. And I think that it makes sense for those other teams not to do it. But also, you need the right coach, as you said, and the captain and everything else. I completely understand all that. But what I'm saying is it does have to be from the top down. You can't, if you're an individual player and you try, let's say Blackwood, who's, he's always a bit controversial in the West Indies. If he suddenly says, well, I'm going to go out there and try and score at a strike rate of 105 in every game. If he gets bowled out for under 30 3 times in a row, that's it. That's the end of his career. Right. That it can't be one play. And that's why in some ways these smaller teams have that ability. But the other thing is a big team did this because of how bad they had become. Right. There's a lot of irrelevant, mediocre and smaller teams in Test cricket who have never come to that point yet. Right. Sri Lanka, you could argue over the last 4 years that Sri Lanka had a chance. I think the reason that teams don't Bazball is because England is the only team in world cricket who could score at a run a ball in one-day cricket. And that is the skill that is actually the most important in this. But there are little things that you can do in Bazball that I think these teams could do. So, for instance, what I've started noticing is a big part of Bazball isn't the attacking shots. It's the fact that England don't let you bowl length. Whatever length you want to bowl, they will shuffle their feet and change it, or they will move where they are in the crease. They'll bat back, they'll bat forward, which means that no other seam bowlers who've just been hitting the same length their whole life suddenly can't do that, and that completely changes it, right? West Indies could do that. Any West Indian batter could do that right now, right? And we've already seen there's already been a counter move. New Zealand won that last test with the keeper up at the stumps. So we're already seeing the first counter move of Bazball, which we didn't really see before. But there are little things like that I think teams could do. For instance, the Stuart Broad roll, right? Tim Southey could do that. That would demoralize teams if he went in and hit 4 sixes before stumps, right? So there are other things that you could do within Bazball, and fielding positions and all sorts of things. I think it's a bit reductive to say only a rich team could do it, but I also think that the way that England did it could only be done by then. But that doesn't mean that another team can't go, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. What do we do well? Because that's all England did, really, at the end of the day. What do we do well? We smash the white ball everywhere. Can we do that here? So West Indies could go, what do we do well? South Africa, New Zealand, whoever else, Sri Lanka, all those sorts of teams could do that sort of stuff. If they're sitting there going, England's only doing this because they're rich, I think they're kind of wrong. And I also think that's the worst way to think about it. You should be thinking, we can have more risks here rather than anyone else.
Yeah, they can only do it because they're rich is almost like, shaking your hands at capitalism, fucked up though it may be, and just thinking, well, I'm never gonna be a success in business. Yeah, the odds are against you, but there's absolutely no reason. Sorry, someone outside my house just walked across dressed as a giant fox.
It happens.
Yeah, just another day in London. Where was I?
You're against capitalism, and then the fox really got in your mind.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to talk about Blackwood. So we recording this on the 2nd of March. I don't know if that's peeping behind the curtain, but South Africa have just beaten the West Indies by a fair bit. I can't remember what it was, but Jermaine Blackwood scored 79 of 93. And it's so interesting what you're talking about, hitting bowlers off their length, because that's what he was doing to Arnold Nokia. He was doing it to Kagiso Rabada. He was just standing out of his crease and he was turning half volleys, good length balls into half volleys. And then he moved all the way back into his crease and he was sort of flaying it on the up through a vacant cover. South Africa had 4 slips at the stage or whatever it was. They were chasing the win, which they would eventually get. So, yeah, the raw materials are there. I don't want you to, and I'm not saying you are, but I think anyone listening to this, I don't want you to discount the internal pressure of the batter under pressure. Just look at Zach Crawley. Zach Crawley does not exist in any other country. You just. I mean, he might not exist in England anymore. Maybe that is the line. Maybe that is. I mean, he'll exist, but not as a Test cricketer. Bazball doesn't whack those who are struggling. But he wouldn't have got those chances. And if a player like let's think of a Saro Irvia, Zabir Hamza, these players who came into the side after weights of runs. I loved a big shout out to your video on the South African batters who get in the side after weights of runs after 3 seasons, realize they're not good enough, and then are cast away. If you're a guy like, I don't know, Keegan Peterson, and you're in the side, and you're looking at it, you think, okay, well, I want a Bazball, but everyone's come in and gone. Man, I'm nervous now. I'm just scared. Like, I don't want to. Yeah. I can't flash outside your stump. I can't Bazball, even if my coach told me I could.
No, I think that's fair. The interesting thing is that Alex Davey and Zach Crawley both did it, right? And they're not traditionally those kinds of players. They're not white ball smashers in the same way. So we know that you can free up batters' mind, but one of those is gone. That's right. He was actually dropped. Zach Crawley's almost, as you say, is so different. They have invested so much time in him. It's almost sunk, the sunk cost fallacy at this point, where they're like, he's eventually going to make it, so we're going to keep investing in him, which he doesn't look like he's going to, but good luck to them. But what I would say is, what it has allowed is, I think it allowed for a player, a lot of those South African players you're talking about, they average in the mid-30s, right? Low 30s to mid-30s, and South Africa get rid of them. What was Bairstow's average, right? There is the ability to unlock someone who has some batting talent. I think when you're talking about the players, all the players you're talking about there are probably not the right kind of players. But Janneman Malan might be the right kind of player. Rassie might be the right kind of player. There are guys around who perhaps can score it around a run of ball, and we know that have been good. We know they're good enough to score against the top level white ball bowlers in the world. You could bring them back in, but realistically, it doesn't matter if it's Keegan Peterson or it's Zach Crawley. If it's not a structural thing, and it has to be a structural thing, you can't have one player Bazball on their own, right? There's a reason why Sehwag, Gilchrist, Quinton de Kock have strike rates that don't look like anyone else's in world cricket. It's impossible to do that unless you are freakishly talented. And the guys we're talking about are not on their level, right? So if you want it, it has to be a full frontal assault and it has to be everyone. But I'm not actually saying that you need to up your strike rate, because I think Bazball, we get fascinated by that, but if you go back, Brendan McCullum played a lot of very defensive innings as well. And there have been times when England, even within this new theory, have tried different kinds of ways of doing it. For me, Bazball is more, what do we do well? What can we triple down on? And I think if you're thinking about it in any other way, because as I said, no one else can, I don't think there's another team in the world who could actually score at a run of ball consistently like England. And if they could have, they should have been doing it in one-day cricket. Maybe India, but even India play with an inherent conservatism to their game. But essentially, what can you do that actually suits what you do? Because if you go back to, as I said, the last big change was the West Indies, right? What did Clive Lloyd do? He went, we keep picking spinners. We don't have a world-class spinner at the moment. Other teams are better at playing spin than we are. And we're getting into this shootout with teams with second-rate spinners. What do we have a lot of? Fast bowlers. Let's go with that.
Our next partner is Athletic Greens. If cricket has taught us anything, it's that green things are good for you. I take AG1 by Athletic Greens every day. I gave AG1 a try because a while back I was stuck in a studio reporting on New Zealand, England on overnight. When those games weren't on, I was up early watching India, Australia at around 4 a.m. In between afternoon naps, I had to watch the Women's World Cup. And when all that was finished, I was doing early mornings for Bangladesh, England. Ignoring the fact that there's too much cricket, that's a stupid schedule for a human being as well. And so Athletic Greens was a far better alternative to ice baths. And after taking it, I felt a lot better. In fact, the whole thing probably kept me sane and healthy at the same time. And also being the kind of nutritional drink I needed to survive those hours, and also the 2 a.m. biltong binges I did a few times. Look, I am not going to pretend I have a balanced diet, so Athletic Greens is how I cover the nutritional basis. 1 small scoop of AG1 with water, and I drink it first thing in the morning each day. Done. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and also 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/Inker. That's the Inker from the end of my Red Inker podcast. So athleticgreens.com/Inker. Check it out now because it is the best green top you'll ever invest in.
With all due respect to South Africa, I know you probably know I'm absolutely obsessed with what they do with the number 7 batting position, but they are basically saying in all forms of cricket, we're going in with 5 bowlers because this is what is best for us. Now, I might disagree with it, but I actually think maybe they have had better results because they've done that than they would have had if they've gone in with an average player at number 7. That's the sort of thing that you can really, really commit to. And I think that what Bazball should be doing for a smaller team with no money is, okay, now there's nothing on the table. Let's start again. Who's our best 8 players? What do they all do? Forget it. They might all be batters. They might all be spinners. They might all be wicket keepers. Then you'd be Sri Lanka. But let's look at our best 8 players and then let's build a style of cricket around that works. And I think that is completely on the table for any team.
That's such a good way of thinking of it. You know, I hadn't done that before. Thinking of Bazball as what are we good at, and let's just double down on that. Because, like you say, England are good at power hitting and scoring runs very quickly. They haven't really done anything to their bowling. Their bowling stayed the same. Robinson's been a find, I suppose, and that's really helped. But they still got a pretty average spinner. They still are insecure about their keeper, but it's about selections then, right? That's what we're talking about. And let's talk about South Africa. I mean, in this first test, they selected Mutasami as Janssen as number 7 and Mutasami as the spinning all round at 8. He bowled how many overs did he bowl in the first innings? He bowled 8 overs in the first innings, didn't bowl in the second innings, and made no runs. So that's just a sign that South Africa are continuing to. We use the word conservatism a few times in this chat, and I don't know if you cringed at it earlier, but it's not quite the right word. But I think people know what I mean. There's like a proper way of playing Test cricket, and Tem Bavuma in his first pre-match chat as Test captain. By the way, the third man to make a pair in his debut as captain. Was like we're gonna play to our traditional strengths and our traditional values, and he speaks about, you know, we can scoff at Bazball and Nighthawk and all that and think it's built on ideology, but it's almost like so is every other team. But what is your ideology? Is your ideology, are you beholden to the ideology of test, capital T, there's a right way of doing it? Or are you beholden to what is good for you? You know, it's almost like you're I don't know, you're continuing to be vegan while still being anemic. It's like, I don't know. If veganism works for you and you're healthy and you could be Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's realized that eating too much meat was bad for his liver or whatever the case was, you know, great. But if you need to have some chicken, just have some chicken. This metaphor has become messy.
I love that also because in South Africa they believe chicken is salad, so it's an even better metaphor from you, the way that you brought all that together. But think about it this way: South Africa have been almost from 1890 all the way through to now. I've always believed that you need 5 bowlers, right? At the moment, they still believe that you need 5 bowlers, but they have no all-rounder to make that work, right? And so Simon Harmer bats at 7, and Marco Jansen bats at 7, and anyone who looks like an all-rounder bats at 7, right? Well, we are Mulder. Like, how many times did he have to fail? It just wasn't going to work, right? And so my point is, he talks about being true to their thoughts. Maybe, and Temba's a smart dude, and you know, there's some good smart people around him as well. Maybe they sit back and they go, "What is it with us and the 5 bowlers? Our bowlers are great. Do we need 5 bowlers? And maybe we only need 5 bowlers away from home. Maybe we need 6 bowlers away from home, but we only need 4 bowlers at home." And we can start, and they can start to look at changing it that way. And once you open up to that sort of thinking, you can look at every part of your game. And the biggest problem with professional sport is, and you've said it a couple of times, that there's a right way to do it, right? And there isn't. And Bazball has just shown us that. And sport actually constantly evolves. You know, for generations, people bowled at the stumps. Then for generations, people bowled outside the stumps, right? Then for generations, people bowled outside the stumps, back of a length. Then DRS comes in and everyone starts bowling at the stumps again. But everyone believes, the right way to bowl is whatever people are bowling now. They haven't even noticed all the generational changes that have led to the different lines and lengths that have been used in Test cricket, right? And that is, I suppose, what I'm trying to say is when something like Bazball comes about, and it was exactly the same with when Australia started scoring quicker. What also happened is we started using fielders on the boundary, right? So Sehwag would come in and you'd have a deep point, right? You know, the Australians would be attacking and you put someone out. If Michael Vaughan had sat there and just went, we'll just keep all the fielders in, that's what Australia were hoping would happen because that's what they wanted. They wanted to be able to hit a bunch of boundaries early on, knock the new ball old, and then score 400 runs in a day. It's much harder to do that when you've got a deep point and deep backward square leg because your 2 obvious boundary positions have gone, right? If you don't evolve with a change, you don't get better. You stay the same. And if you're doing that from, this would be like, I don't know, Duck, Duck, Go. Have you heard of Duck, Duck, Go?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The Duck, Duck, Go. So that, you know, if they're fighting Google, I'd be shocked if they're sitting in a meeting and go, we have to do what Google do. They're sitting in the meeting and go, okay, what can we do that Google would never be able to do now, right? What can we do that suits us to take on Google? And maybe we never end up as big as Google, but we're never going to start with. But we could throw a couple of punches here because we're Duck, Duck, Go and they're Google, and that's okay. And I think that's where a lot of international teams should be. But I think they're back where you said before, where they're like, whoa, we've only got 6 tests this year.
Yeah.
Right? We can't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It comes full circle to what we're saying because, and that's also one of the interesting parameters about cricket. You know, in rugby or football or any other sport where you can make substitutions, you can go in with a plan A, but you can fall back on a plan B. I think back to, I keep talking about South Africa, obviously, but when South Africa just crushed England by an innings at Lords, and then they go to Manchester and they see a bit of drizzle in the air, and they think that they reckon Simon Harmer's going to be a gun on that track, so they select him and bowl first, and that's where they lose the series from there. You know, they had England on the ropes.
First, didn't they?
Did they bat first? I can't. No, did they bat? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
They batted first when bowling first was the right option. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's all right.
They bat first because they've got the second spinner and they want to be bowling on the 4th day. And England are like, thanks a lot, guys. We'll happily do that. We'll bowl under cover and we'll skittle you for whatever, and we'll win the series that way. So, because cricket is you play with the team you got, there's so much riding on you getting your strategy right. up front, and because you don't have that plan B. But if you've only got those 6 tests, if you go out there thinking, if South Africa goes out and says we're going to have 4 quicks and we're going to bat 7 bowlers, we're going to have 7 batters, but our 4 bowlers are tired, and now Aiden Markram has to bowl 20 overs in a game, and he goes at 4 and over, and you lose by a lot. Well, then Temba Bavuma has to sit there to all the journalists like me who've been drinking the night before and saying, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? And everyone's writing him off, and race comes into it, and it's a whole thing, and Temba's having sleepless nights. Maybe you can understand why he wouldn't want to do that. But if he had 12 tests and he was playing 4 series against 4 different nations, and maybe he was going around the world, and maybe he could say, hey, this away series in Bangladesh, or this home series against Zimbabwe, or whatever the case is, like we can have a go. And it's such a pertinent point that you made. When England started Bazballing, they were rubbish. They were a terrible team. Their plans A to D had all failed. It's almost like I did write this in my piece. Bazball is as much a sign of England's privilege as it is of their gumption. And I don't think I wouldn't want to present a scenario where one was more important than the other. I think that Bazball is very much a consequence of their privilege, but you'd be a fool if you said that what they did wasn't innovative, and that innovation was born out of desperation as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the Temba thing, I think that's very fair. But the other thing I would say is, South Africa doing better than I'm aware of? Are they? Are they in the top 4 in the world? Are they a constant threat for the World Test Championship? Do you know what I mean? And this goes back to the England thing. So when I did my big research on India, it was a huge project that I did. It took me however long to put it together. And the thing I kept coming back to was India are too good. They should be worse. If India were worse, it's easier to rip it up and start again. And the big problem for Indian cricket is that they're actually quite good. That's not the case for all these other teams. But anyway, thank you very much for coming on. Great chat, and I'm sure you'll come on again soon. And I only say that based on the fact that, depending on which episode I put up first, you might already be in the system to come on again.
No, thanks, Jad. Always a pleasure.